Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm just gonna turn off this transcription because it's driving me crazy. Okay, thank you for your precious time this evening and attention. We're, as Petra just said before we started the recording, hopefully going to keep this as succinct as possible. But that said, we really do welcome everyone and thank you for your attention. We are using software that we are not super familiar with, so that adds to the drama of the evening because things could go terribly wrong at any moment. But I think we're going to do fine. So I'm just going to pass it back to Petra for a second to do a more official welcome, and then I'll outline our program for tonight.
So I'd just like to recognize that right now I am working on the traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I'm very lucky to be able to do so, and some of you may be on the Squamish lands as well. And I saw tonight earlier, I actually am going to change this up a bit because I saw a presenter tonight from Alberta who said that as an educator, she also changed the land acknowledgement to make a commitment to what she was going to do to further this. So I would like to commit myself to the movement for reconciliation and to decolonizing our curriculum. And as an educator, I think that's what I can do as part of my working on these wonderful traditional territories.
Thank you. I think that's a great spirit with which we want to sort of approach our whole topic for tonight. We show this graphic every time we meet, and it really represents the system of which everyone who's listening to my voice right now is part of. We think of systems like the school system. We think of systems like that keep us organized. We think of PLP as a learning community and a learning system. And the learning plan that we're going to focus on tonight is a really important part of that. So you will hear myself and Petra and Emily may pop in from time to time too, our voices on the meeting tonight. We are half of the PLP team. The rest of our crew are not with us joining tonight, but I'm sure are joining in spirit. We really do, though, we hope that you also join in this meeting and make it a conversation and participatory, and that our goal is for you to get from our time together information and answers that you may be seeking or that may come up through the course of the presentation. So if you are listening live tonight and joining, there is a chat function here in Microsoft Teams. Emily is watching the chat room, so feel free to drop questions in there sort of as they occur, and she will collect those or where appropriate sort of respond to them sort of synchronously in the chat room. There's also a hand raise function, which I saw her modeling as well. If you would like to be brave and use the microphone and sort of interact in real time, feel free to use that raise hand symbol, and either I'll notice it or Petra or Emily and I will notice it, and we'd love to pause and have other voices included in the presentation. If something comes up after the fact, or if you are watching this on the recorded replay, then you can try pushing the hand raise button all you like, but no one will see it. So you will have to resort to email. So feel free at any time for this or other reasons to send us email. plp@seacove.ca is a general purpose email that reaches all of us, or you can reach out to us individually as well. So that is kind of, we do hope and encourage that. And otherwise, it tends to be much more of a talking head lecture, and we'd like it to be more participatory. So tonight, though, we're going to jump into our main topic right off the top. And we said this is about introducing the learning plan. And for parents, my secret hope is that this is not the first time, or in the emails I sent you announcing this event, that it was not the first time you'd heard these words spoken around your home. Because we've been encouraging the learners to have this conversation at home with their parents, maybe with siblings, with other important people in their life, because you are a very important part of making this idea come to life. First, though, like we do with the kids, whenever time we start a new project, we always talk about the why. Are we learning this? What relevance does this have to, quote, the real world, or to me as an individual, even if it's just maybe a selfish motivation? Why should I care? So This is something that is not unique to grade 8 or 9 if you're a parent of that grade level. This is something we do with all of our learners grades 8 through 12. So right now, I was about to say off the top of my head, I can't even remember how many students across PLP, but or 100 plus, more than 100 plus students have been working through doing this process right now. This is a formal way to structure the goals, the habits, the systems that lead to learning performance success. A plan is something that we as teachers can read and understand the student's intent. Parents can read and understand the student's intent. So it helps to minimize misunderstandings and poorly communicated expectations on both sides of the relationship. Most importantly, we feel that it is about engaging the learners in the decision making about their own learning. So it is the students themselves who are the authors of their individual learning plan. And then through the co-agency of us as teachers and parents, our goal, our hope, our desire is for them to realize all the success that they want for themselves. So this is really in line with this concept, student agency, a word that we use a lot in the classroom, that we use a lot in conversations with your children, and that we ourselves try to model as part of the program. We are looking at this spectrum here and moving from just engagement to empowerment. And as Petra and I have been having some pretty in-depth conversations through conferences with our senior students, our grade 11s and 12 students, over the last week. And we've said quite bluntly to some of them, like, if they are not the person, if they are not the agent that cares the most about their success, then they cannot realize their true potential. And so this idea of them being agents is key. Of course, that looks differently at all the different grade levels and levels of maturity, and that's what learning and growing is all about. But the document that students have been working on, the learning plan itself, does look the same across all of the different grade levels, which I think speaks to the versatility of what we're trying to do here. So we are going to tonight, don't worry, you don't have to find a magnifying glass. We are going to zoom in here. But we are going to go through this document and try and like parse it a little bit and help explain some of the rationale and the vocabulary that you will see here. And then what our real hope is that armed with that vocabulary, armed with some new learning literacy, you can have a conversation with your own learner. They have this document that they have now completed on their iPad at this very moment. And our hope is that it is a living, breathing document. This is their plan, an individual plan that they've authored that should be the guide, the North Star for their learning for this school year. So we're going to break this down a little bit and, as I said, sort of explain kind of what's actually going on here, and then we hope that it's over to you to continue that conversation at home. Petra, Emily, anything to add before we start looking more closely?
Nope,
No?
you're good. Go for it.
Okay. Anything from comments and so far? I assume if there are something in the chat, you guys will tell me because I can't see it. Okay. All right. So let's start at the bottom. So I actually think to understand the learning plan, it is maybe helpful for us to go from the bottom to the top. So the bottom three boxes are boilerplate, if you will. They are not parts of this form that students fill out. They are provided there to be a reference both for parents and for students. Because it helps kind of put into context the parts that are above. For parents, probably maybe the logical, but maybe not actually best, but we'll do it anyways. The logical place to start is over here on the letter grade column. And that's because probably, most likely, you are familiar with these markers because they were the ones that you had on report cards of past yourself. And for your child, this is what you've seen on report cards in those senior elementary level classes. You receive a letter grade at report card time. In high school, starting in grade 10, students go, the letter grade is not really there anymore. What's replaced with is a percentage. So we've actually taken a 100-point scale and sliced and diced, and we actually, for each course, arrive at a number that is sort of the signifier of student performance. That is changing, and not just inside PLP, but inside BC education generally, and increasingly, and depending on what teachers' classrooms you've come from in the past, you've been seeing, whoa, malfunction. You've been seeing this proficiency language instead. So these kinds of words like extending, accomplished, developing, emerging, this chart that you see at the bottom, oh, and I just should add, this though, if you've been keeping an eye on Shobi, is what you see. These little weather emoji icons. So it's very, at first blush, a bit confusing. There's all kinds of different bits of information coming at you, and it maybe is hard to discern what actually is going on, or what we hear sometimes from parents, especially new to PLP parents, just boil it down for me. How are they doing? What's their grade? So this chart is at the very bottom of the learning plan, probably because it's maybe the least important part of it, but it's there as a reminder of kind of, all right, what is the conversion logic, right? There actually is a way to sort of move between these different ways of recording student success on paper, or in the case of our world today, like at the end of the day, something's got to get punched into the computer. So there has to be a way to kind of move between all of the descriptive feedback we give about performance into something that the computer is happy to accept. And that's what we're looking at here. So for PLP students that are currently in grade 8 and 9, it is the proficiency scale that you will see tomorrow on your report card. And that's all you will see. There will not be a letter grade. There will not be a percentage. You'll just receive one of these band indicators at the extending, accomplished, developing, and emerging level. If you're a little bit confused by that and want to know what that really means, now you can read across and get a better feeling of kind of, if you had to and wanted to translate it into one of these other scales, you could. Students that are in grades 10, 11, and 12 will receive descriptive feedback and a percentage. So that's what you'll see on report cards tomorrow. Okay. How, though, do we figure out what these proficiencies look like? This is a chart or a graph that is used a lot in our classrooms. We use it a lot in a large placemat version when we're having conversations with students about their work. And it helps to provide some more description, some more descriptors, some more language around when we use the word emerging, when we use the word extending, what do we actually mean? So the government's definition is in that proficiency scale row, right? The student demonstrates an initial, a partial, a complete, or a sophisticated understanding. And we really emphasize this with the kids. This is not about smartness. This is not about ability. This is not about potential. It is solely about what has been demonstrated. It's about the evidence that has been offered and has been evaluated. So often we know some students might be underperforming their potential. We can only base it on the demonstrations of learning. What does that actually look like when we're evaluating their output, their actual artifacts of learning, their evidence? Well, these descriptor words are a little bit more maybe helpful. Our goal for all PLP students is at that accomplished level. Our belief, our strong belief, is that all students of all abilities are able to reach for their appropriately for their age and for their maturity and with adaptations, this accomplished level. So a complete understanding, a comprehensive, detailed, thoughtful understanding. Some students are going to, on occasion, and sometimes more than just rarely, extend. They will actually be able to go deeper, be more insightful, more show not just the complete understanding, but a sophisticated understanding. They're able to transfer their knowledge into that into other contexts and with other content. Sometimes, though, that there are gaps, or it's partial, or it's inconsistent. Often we talk about like maybe what it's like to build a jigsaw puzzle on the table, right? At the developing level, you've got a pretty good idea of what the picture is, but there's a few pieces missing, right? Enough that we can pretty much understand what the picture is, but not enough to know that it's not complete. And sometimes it's emerging, right? The student has found a few pieces of the puzzle, they've kind of got them in the right areas, but we don't yet know what that picture is like, right? The other way to kind of understand that is to use this kind of language. So these are sort of like quotes from an imaginary learner of what they might be able to reflect on at their various levels. So again, the accomplished level, that's our goal. Our hope is the student would be able to say about a learning task, I get it. I can do it on my own. I understand the instructions. I can go away, and with the ability, information, and skills that I have, I can complete the work. Occasionally, again, like we said, and sometimes it's more than occasionally, students go beyond what's expected. That demonstration that they offer is at a sophisticated level above what the expectation would be for most students that accomplished. That's again where they not only get it, but they're actually able to transfer their understanding and be able to teach it to others, right? Beginning and almost, right? I'm starting to get it, right? I get most of it. I can do most of it on my own. Or I'm not really sure I get it yet, but I'm trying, right? I've made that effort. I've like made that first step. I am trying. And sometimes I'm getting started, great, and I do my best with help. I do my best with a little bit of help, right? So now when we actually talk to kids, we can say, hey, let's take a look at your work. Show me here on the scale, where do you think it is? What is that? What is the best descriptors of where you think it is? And you've read my feedback about what I thought about your work. Did you understand my description of like what we think is not here that should be here? Do you know where to take it, right? And then students are able to almost always very accurately assess where they're at on this scale and identify those opportunities to move their work up the scale. The last thing before I maybe let Petra add some sort of comment is that arrow at the top is actually, I think, important because it's very easy to reduce this to like 4 columns and think that we're marking things now just on a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4. And really the arrow shows a gradation between these columns. It is very unusual for us to just cleanly break it into this. It is a continuum of learning, and what we are looking for always is that demonstration and a student's best demonstration of these competencies. So Petra, do you want to just talk a little bit about like how a student's first attempt might be at that beginning emerging level, but the expectation of ours that when they revisit that, maybe later on in the same project, they would be able to grow that and maybe they don't end in the same place they start?
Not sure I need to talk about it. I think you just said it. But yes, I can. I do think that it is sometimes missed, and sometimes we always think that when the first attempt at something, we should be competent at it, we should be complete at it. But in reality, we know that when we're introduced to new skills, which is what school is about, I hope that's the point of learning, that we often start with basic understanding, superficial, narrow, uh, emerging, in other words, and that throughout the performances of our learning, we would hope to see that, as Brian was describing, on that gradient scale, on that arrow moving along. And that doesn't mean it always moves up. That isn't, it is, learning is never a smooth path, right? It does tend to go back and forth sometimes, but on the whole, we're always hoping that that gradient is moving slowly up the hill. And the idea is that in a proficiency scale in competency-based assessment, that we are looking for your best performance and we're building from that so that you're always then able to say to yourself, I'm accomplished at this. I can continue being accomplished at this. And now I can even be sophisticated at this. I can move into an extending realm. And that's always our goal with our learning. So we were just talking about that with senior grade levels. You know, it's the first time they've done response writing, and everything is a little bit strange, right? And I always remind ourselves that we're coming out of a strange period of living where really school has been super disrupted, in learning has been disrupted for a long period of time in a regular way. So it's okay to actually own and say, yeah, I'm only at an initial stage of understanding this and how to do it. And then looking, how do we move forward? What can we do differently? And that is really the difference between proficiency assessment, competency-based assessment, and a more traditional mark book, grade book, one chance learning.
Yeah, and I would just add, even though the conversion chart there is at the bottom, really we spend a lot of time with the kids trying to get them to resist the idea of converting it into what they might have experienced with the past. So like I said, a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they immediately think, well, if I'm developing, I'm 2, so 2 divided by 4 is 50%. Okay, I'm barely passing, right? It absolutely does not convert in that way. And that's why we use this idea of the logic, right? It's not a mathematical equation. There's logic that comes in, and Petra makes that point. We're looking for your, and what eventually we are recording as your proficiency is not an average of all of your performances. So if you were really emerging at the beginning, but you're accomplished by the end, so no, it's not that at all. We are looking for your best demonstration, and then that is where we say that's the performance that you have recorded.
But for the learners on this call or watching at home later, that does not mean that you get to be extending and then never show that again. Then that becomes your new expectation. So that really is also the balance as well.
Okay.
And I was just going to turn to the one last point, Brandon, that this part of the learning plan, when you're looking at your students, your learners' learning plan, you'll see all of this is exactly the same and is a boilerplate. We put it on there so they can always see it, so you can always see it, but it doesn't get changed. This part is the same standard for everyone.
Yeah, and if parents have been keeping an eye on Shobi, you've already seen for many pieces of work, not every piece of work, but for many pieces of work, when a proficiency is recorded, you will see those weather emojis. So you get that's just sort of a shorthand representation of where we felt their demonstration matched these descriptors, this scale. All right, moving up then on the growth plan, or pardon me, on the learning plan, is this last box that is set. This is again boilerplate, and it describes what we call success behaviors of the accomplished learner. And it's in 6 different categories. And it's really an interesting kind of set of little bullet points here. Please note and notice that in brackets at the top there, it says not used to determine the achievement grade. So this again is maybe a bit of a departure for some parents from maybe your own recollection of school. For example, things like tardiness, or whether it be late to class or late with assignments, that's not something that students actually, quote, lose marks for. Students will never be, and should not actually in any class, this is a universal, not a PLP thing, should not be penalized for handing in late assignments. What will happen though, students who hand in late work in late don't get the benefit of timely feedback from teachers, don't get the benefit of an opportunity to incorporate that feedback into a revised version of work, and therefore their work does not benefit from an increased level of proficiency. So while not directly a result of a negative behavior, the result is in a learner that is not necessarily as successful. So what this is helpful for is in conversations with students that we have as teachers and that you may want to have as parents about asking, the accomplished learner, the student that is having success, what are they actually doing? Right? We are firm believers that it's not about smartness. It's not because one kid is smarter than the other. But the quote unquote smart kid is probably doing 1, 2, 3, or a collection of these things. And as a strategy, they are working for them. So these are the things we are talking about either specifically or less specifically all the time with the kids. And it's here at the bottom of their learning plan to give them reminders, vocabulary, suggestions for the part that's going to come directly above it. We've broken it down into these 6 categories: agency, engagement, conduct, preparation, attendance, and punctuality. There are probably many more. We'd actually be open to ideas of things that should be maybe added or changed here. Again, it's kind of just meant to be like a cheat sheet, a prompt, or again, things to think about. And there are things that, and when we are conferencing with students around their success, at any spectrum of achievement, right? These are the things where we can say, well, you are consistently doing outstanding work, really at that sophisticated level. But, occasionally, I think you need to seek help. And they'd be like, what do you mean? I have to come in for help? I should come to tutorial? We'd say, absolutely, because, you're doing a lot of work, but we've noticed you're handing it in really late at night, right? And maybe it's because you're really wrestling with ideas and not sure if you've gone down the right path with some of your work. If you had just come to tutorial, checked in with us for a 15-minute chat in the morning, we might have been able to save you 2 or 3 hours of needless hand wringing. So that's a great example of it's not at first pass thinking that this is just for one type of student. These are the types of behaviors that are successful for all. Petra, can you chat for a second while I disable an alarm?
Yes, that would be great if you turned off your nagger. Actually, this is a good question. Maybe Emily wants to chime in as well. And Brian, we had a question in the chat that, how do we encourage or support children who aren't taking responsibility for their work or showing a desire to revisit, improve, or do better? What? There are children who don't want to do that? I'm shocked, and I'm only teasing there, Rachel, because it's a really good question, and it's actually one we struggle with every day. I have my thoughts. Does anybody want to go first?
Okay, I'll say one thing.
Okay, yeah.
I did read this, and it is something that I think is really important and really is central to most of our teaching. But I do think it is about those like one-on-one connections and the relationships. I've found that in conferencing and talking one-on-one with a student, you can really encourage them and show them how they can succeed and they can get better, because giving feedback and giving opportunities for students to revise is actually quite liberating. And I think sometimes, especially in grade 8, some of the grade 8s have never been given that opportunity before. So it takes practice to, take feedback and take critique and work to get better. But sometimes that desire isn't there at first. When they realize, a teacher is rooting for them and giving them specific feedback on how to revise, I've seen success over time. But
I was just going to say I 100% agree. And actually, I was going to echo that similar. My immediate thought was just really, it depends on the student for that answer, because I think we take a different tack depending on the relationship with the kid. And definitely it depends on who we think has the best relationship in those situations, which is why it's also awesome to work with a team of 6 people, because we also know sometimes that, a kid who really can be pushed by me may not be pushed in the same way by Brian or Emily. Like that's why it's really great to also work with a team, or Cody or the Harrises. Um, it really does help as well to know the kid. I don't think agency is something that comes easily to everyone, nor is it engaged in the same way to every student or learner. And so I think that really is where it comes to us encouraging them in different ways and talking to the kid as well. I will say that after all my years of teaching, the learner who fully rejects agency is incredibly rare. There's always either a reason or a misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge about how to gain that agency. It's actually rare that a student or a learner doesn't want the agency. It's just a matter of how to access it. If that makes sense.
And I would just, obviously agree. And we just also pick up on a great point Emily made about it being something that is measured over time. So it's like, and so for today, you know, the learning plan has that spirit where we are measuring something over the course of a school year. So we are not worried about something that's happening necessarily in 10 days or 10 weeks. We're looking at the duration of the arc over 10 months. And for the majority of students that we have in PLP, we have I always call it an honor and pleasure to have taught them for years. Right. So many of them stay with us for the duration of their 5 years. So by the time they go from grade 8 to grade 12, we know them, as Emily and both Petra said, we have a relationship with them that is different and maybe closer than with other teachers, which allows us to know them well when they are underperforming or when they maybe need to be encouraged in a different way, or when we can push and maybe when we can pull back. So I think in any, you know, so you don't have to worry about, okay, it's going to take 5 years, but like it's not something I would worry about. Like it's a long game is what I'm trying to say. It's a long game. And grade 8 is still just grade 8. Right. So yeah. Okay. Thank you for that great question, though. I would if you have more, please, for the whole audience, drop them in there. That's great. Moving up on the plan, then. The success behaviors of the accomplished learner are really form the basis of this box that sits just above it. This is where the kids start writing. So above here, which you can't see yet, is what the kids have detailed their specific plan for each of their course areas. Then below it is sort of a general area where we say, to achieve this, I will. And we ask the students to actually break things down into 3 distinct areas. We ask them to describe the disposition of the type of learner that would be able to do what they just said. So I actually asked, you're going to see the student's name on this in just a second, but I asked her tonight if she minded me using hers as an example, and she gave her consent. So in this case, Annie says, well, the person that's going to achieve the plan that I've just written is one that takes the time to think and consider. They reflect on what they've done, and they are aware of themselves and their work. They believe in their ideas. They know and understand how to support themselves in their growth, even if that means asking for help. So we really ask them to be individual here, right? To reflect on who they are as a person, who they think of themselves as a learner now, and who they kind of think of who they would like to be, and to say, what would that person think? So it might be aspirational at this point, to circle back to that previous question, right? So it's not necessarily asking them, hey, who are you right in this minute? Because as a learner, we don't believe the concrete has dried, right? It might be slightly aspirational. That's where the next box over is the habits. Well, if you say you're going to be this kind of person, you know, I'm going to be a person that like eats vegetables. Well, then what's the habit going to be? The habit is going to be, I'm going to have a different vegetable on my plate every day. Here's where they're supposed to get specific. What's a single actionable item that I can do? So in this case here, Annie's driving me crazy because she did not use a capital C on craft because it's a proper noun, which would be a signal here that when she says craft, that's a software that we use in senior PLP. She says, I'm going to start using craft to document and write down my learning from things that are outside of school, which is something we've been talking a lot with them. That is a single actionable thing that she could do that she has identified would have a benefit to her. Great. And then that last box is probably the one that in the review of learning plans, students did struggle with the most, which just identifies it as the area of greatest opportunity. That is, what are the systems? What are the collections of habits, the groupings of habits that I'm going to put together in a systematic way that when repeated enough times become automatic and just become, again, part of that disposition of who I'm going to be. So we think that there's lots of opportunities for students in these 3 boxes to revise these over time, maybe even over maybe the course of this school year. But this is maybe in some ways the hardest part of the learning plan for them, because it asked them to really think, which students love to do sometimes. I'll keep going, Petra, unless you want to jump in.
Nope. Go ahead, please.
All right. Yeah. Then the next boxes above it are a little bit more perfunctory. There's one row for each of their academic areas. So in grade 10, that's 2 courses. For grade 11, 12, it's 1 right now. And for grades 9, 8, and 9, it's 5 or 4. 1, 2, 3, 3 courses: cymatics, humanities, and maker. So for each of their courses, they are asked to, what are my strengths? What am I bringing to the table? What am I good at in this subject area that I'm going to build on? Right? So let's celebrate myself. So Annie here is in grade 10. She's been with us since grade 8. So she kind of has some of our PLP language already down. So she's kind of like summarized that. The second box in the middle there is their growth. What are the areas that I kind of know about myself that I want to step outside my comfort zone, that I want to stretch a little bit, that maybe I've kind of already identified or teachers have identified for me as those areas of opportunity for trying something new, trying something different, or, I know that I'm deficient in, that I want to actually name it to claim it. I want to grow in this area. And then the last box is the support box. This is where we've asked the learners to say, hey, who outside of myself is in my world that is going to support me in this goal? So that could be teachers, that could be parents, that could be other adults in their world. And we've asked them to try again as much as possible and whenever possible to be specific, to actually name things that they are going to do. So sometimes they say, oh, I'm going to ask for more help. We would probably push back on that and say, well, who are you going to ask for help from? When are you going to ask for that help? How are you going to ask for that help? So the support box is an important one for parents to pay a close eye on because it may actually involve you. The yellow boxes that you see there is for each of their subjects. We ask the learners to identify the performance level that they want to see themselves achieve by the end of this school year. So, for example, we mentioned report cards are coming tomorrow, right? You're going to see sort of an interim performance indicator to date on that report card. It might be the same as what's in this yellow box. It might not, right? So as we just discussed, there might be room for growth already, but this is where they think by June they would like to end. This is the course that they are charting for themselves.
Can I build on that a little bit, Brian? You'll notice in the learning plan, probably a lot of comments from me early on about, can you add to this? Can you revise this? So one of the areas in this particular area with strengths, growth, and support is there were students who thought, oh, I'll just copy and paste the same strengths, growth, and support for each of my classes. And you might have seen a comment from me right away that said something like, what are you specifically going to do for that course? Because we do want the students in this case, it's different than the disposition, habits, and systems, which apply to learning. The learning for strengths and growth and support should be different in different subject areas, depending on their own strengths and growth and support. One of the other things I did push on as well from having looked at all the learning plans was that a lot of times the supportive would say something like, my mom will spell check it for me. And you might have seen a comment from me that is, what is your agency in that? What will you do? So, at that point, it does just become even, I will set up a time with my mom to ask her to do this for me. That's the motion I want the learners to take on for themselves as well.
Okay. We're getting almost to the top here. This section here is kind of maybe a bit confusing, so I'm going to very briefly talk about it. It probably warrants more further examination later. But at the very top, it says, this year, I plan my learning to look like, and there are 3 broad categories. In BC's curriculum, these are known as the core competencies. This is what students are actually supposed to be spending their time in school learning: how to communicate, how to think, and how to relate on a personal and social level. Those are broken into sort of these 7 different subcategories. So not just thinking, but creative thinking and critical and reflective thinking, for example. And within those, the ministry has actually identified different profiles. And these are profiles that run across the development of your child from the time they enter the public system in kindergarten all the way through grade 12. These are not grade related. These are not, grade level related. These are not subject related. They can be in context in any subject area across the entire curriculum, across all of the courses that students take. I've just pulled a screenshot here from the ministry's website for the critical thinking, reflective thinking profiles, and they usually are profiles 1 through 6, and you can see at the very entry point, like it's I can explore, right? I can explore materials and actions. I can show whether I like something or not, right? That is something like at kindergarten, teachers are looking for. Is a child able to say, I like this toy or I like that toy, right? And it goes up from there. And by the time they get to profile 5, 6, we're talking very sophisticated demonstrations. Probably, Petra and I would tell you candidly, very few adults are at profiles 5 and 6. So what we ask the students to do, though, is to take a close look at that website for each of these categories and try and see where they would situate themselves. So they had to do a little bit of reading. They had to go and find these different things, try and take the vocabulary and say, how does this apply to me? And what I said to them is helpful is like read up and read down, and you sort of find, oh, okay, this is kind of like where I'm at. So here Annie has said for communicating, she wants the work she does this year to be clear and purposeful, but she's going to use a variety of forms appropriately. Okay, so as teachers, that's important for us, because if we see her, for example, always like preferring written output, right? Then we might say, well, hey, you said you're going to communicate in a variety of forms. Let's see you do these other demonstrations using other formats, for example. So across these, they're not things, again, that are directly assessed, but in the work that students do, the assessment becomes clear. So again, they're conversation starters more than something that we're specifically marking against, like, a score sheet, but they are really helpful to help kids and parents get a feeling of like, where actually is my child in these stages of development? Petra, you look like you
And
want
I just add more on this. Each of the classes had a really fun time. I think it was fun. You can ask them if they thought it was fun. Looking at picture books and identifying these skills. So we talked about the core competencies in terms of different picture books and did some reading together, and everybody 8 to 12 did a lesson on this. So it is a useful one to have, a starting place for you and your learners to have a conversation about. And we talked a lot about how, although these core competencies are not assessed, students self-assess these once a year. And in their next year, in the new reporting order, it will actually be part of their report cards as well. How that's going to look is still being determined, but province-wide. So it's not assessed by the teachers, but we talked a lot about how these core competencies actually are habits of great learners and actually weave through all the work they do no matter what. It would be probably impossible to do any type of learning without communicating in some form, or and there's a lot of collaboration and so on and so forth. So it is actually really interesting to have these conversations. And as Brian highlighted, it's what they plan their learning to look like. It's not a percentage. So if they say, I'm a profile 3, it does not mean I'm saying my learning is 50%. It can't be seen that way. And really, that was something we really tried to work hard on breaking down.
Yeah. Okay, and then we've reached the very top of the plan. The very top box, the very top box on the plan is their statement of learning intent. Here, just in a narrative paragraph, the learner has sort of said, hey, this is my manifesto for this school year. This is who I plan to be. This is what my goals are for myself. These are my my desires as a learner. And for the senior students, you can see often they've actually included a percentage here. Like this is like if I'm going to throw a dart at the grade book, this is where I hope it would land. This is the great entry point because it actually gives you that sort of the mindset of where the student is at. So parents, I think, if nothing else, that is a must read. And I think a perfect conversation starter. because it really does either start a conversation around, wow, you've set some like ambitious goals for yourself. I can't wait to support you in those goals. Let's talk about down the plan here, how you plan to do it. So maybe I can help keep you mutually accountable for that. Or, and it can go the other way as well. Sometimes, and we're actually quite happy in the review of the drafts, we often, or not often, occasionally we have students that sort of undercut themselves or will actually sell themselves short on their potential and their ability. This is not a plan for who they are today, but this is a plan for who they're going to be during this school year. So we want it to be realistic, but we also want it to be optimistic and consistent with the growth we know that they can achieve. So that should all be part of that sort of opening paragraph. All right, that is the learning plan. It is in Shobi right now. There is a learning plan course in Shobi. Each student has their document in there, so it can be opened and read on via Shobi. And there is also some feedback on original drafts of their feedback on their learning plan as well. All right, a brief role here. I've used it a few times today, but I actually seldom like to use the word goals. In PLP, we are disciples of Guru James Clear. And he's the author of a book called Atomic Habits, which if you're not familiar with, it'd be a fantastic under the tree prize. I get no percentage. I get no kickback. I don't know why I'm trying to shill for it here, but it is a fantastic book. And actually just follow him on Instagram. He posts all his best content for free there, including gems like this, which we actually firmly believe, right? Goals are good for setting a direction, but systems are best for making progress. And if you don't like that one, we also like this. And this is what we are really emphasizing with the kids all the time, right? Aspiration is good, but it's the system that is going to actually be what equals achievement. So, thank you, Emily, for putting some James Clear content. For the grade 8s, he's been staring down at you all school year. Have you noticed him on the wall? He's up there on the wall. Now you wonder who that bald guy is up there. So Petra, I'm going to just turn it over to you just for some examples to like sort of bring this to life from other students' learning plans, and then we're going to move on, conscious of the time.
Perfect. So because the other students are unidentifiable on these, they will know who they are, but so I won't mention any names, but I will tell you that these examples are from different grade levels. So if you're wondering like, how do they write so well? Some may be senior grade levels or they may not be. So this is a great example of those systems where they see the support coming in and different types of support in different types of classes. So for example, this particular learner says that some support I could get that it would help me to be called on in class because I most likely will not raise my hand. Well, that's fantastic information for a teacher. It also is a great thing where I mentally file that way and think, oh, by next year, that's a goal we're going to work on too for this learner. And that idea of I'm going to set aside a time at home to get work done, which is fantastic advice for humanities, but also this is why it's on one page, because I think their maker and semantics teachers should see that as well. So those are great examples of support that is advocacy for themselves as learner, but also informs us as teachers about support. I'm waiting to see if he changes the slide. We're going backwards in time instead of forwards. Another learner here. And I really like this example because it's a great example of habits versus systems. So this first one is things like habits, like put due dates into things. Again, the war on capitalization continues. Things is a proper noun, so it should have a capital. Learner, I know you're on this call and you know who you are.
He does use the proper noun in the next sentence, making it all the more frustrating and maddening.
True. So putting things in things, it's a very interesting point. One of the one of the things we were talking about today, Brian and I were at an after-school professional development session. That's why our brains are flying at double time. We were talking about these kind of habits that are so ingrained in elementary school, like having the agenda book they write in, and oh, you're going to use your agenda book all the time in high school. And SECO doesn't have an agenda book they provide anymore at all to any learner. Never mind PLB, non-PLB, doesn't matter. There's no agenda book for reasons. And one of the things we've been trying to help students do, PLP students get that help through things. So I really enjoy the fact that the student has mentioned that here. And then it's a great example of a habit versus a system, right? Where then the student has said their system is going to be at the end of the day thinking about what they're going to do for tomorrow and getting ahead on what they have to work, which is going to be easier with the habit of recording things in things. So it's a good interlocking of the habits and the system. So those are some examples to help you see the kind of things your learners should be incorporating in their plan. Do you want me to talk about round 2 with the learning plans now, Brian? So
sure, briefly.
We did an initial overview of what the first view of the learning plans was. That's where I went through, read them all, sort of said, hey, what's missing, what's not missing, just a brief, like, did you include everything? Did you try to make it about you, not other people? Those kind of things. That's why you'll see initial comments from me on everything. Now, teachers, PLP teachers, will be going through these with each of their students in one-on-one conferences and saying, hey, this is what you've written for my subject area. This is the habits and systems you've said that will feed into that. This is your learning intention. And those conversations are just beginning to happen across each grade level and each subject area. And that is where we'll really get into the, hey, on your report card, this is where this grade was, this is on this interim, and this is where it's going next.
Yeah, so this is something, as we said, is sort of going to be the guiding star for learners this year. We said it forms the basis of the communication around success and achievement between teachers and students, and part of the conversation that teachers have with parents as well. So just to sort of, this is a lot of text, but just to sort of highlight some of the things here of what's happened and what will happen. So before the plan, we're into middle of November, late November here, because especially for the students we've just met in grade 8, we needed to establish like their baseline. We needed to get to know them. We don't have that relationship with you yet. So we wanted to sort of make sure we had that so that we are able to have those learning conversations in an informed way. Now that the plan is in place, it is how we're going to monitor your achievement. We kind of have like a chart, and we want to sort of say, hey, are you on track or are you deviating from that track? In a moment, I'll mention the growth chart again, which is something that is project specific. So it's the learning plan in the context of each project. Where parents will really hear about the learning plan and where it'll come front and center again are at those twice yearly presentations of learning. These are the student-led conferences that we do in January and then again in spring, where the student stands up in front of parents and teachers and offers a defense of their learning to date. So that sounds very scary, but more it is just a celebration of the great things that they can look back in their portfolio that they've done this year and offer up and share as those great examples of the learning that they've done. And really what they're going to be looking for is, hey, here's what I said in my plan, and here's the evidence that I can show that shows that I am either achieving that or making the right steps in the right directions towards that. And then at reporting periods, the first of which you will see tomorrow, you will also get a confirmation, a verification of that proficiency. So in most cases, what you see on the learning plan is what will be on the report card. In the cases where that's not the case, we've had conversations with those students and made sure that they understand why there's a difference and started the process of talking about how we're going to narrow that gap or bring alignment between the current demonstrations and the demonstration that we know that they're going to be capable of providing by the end of the school year or even by the next final semester reporting. Okay, very briefly, I keep saying briefly and I keep talking more, but here we go. Learners, three important roles. For the learners themselves, they had to complete this document. So I do think they deserve a huge round of applause because it's actually a big, gnarly document that when you see it, you scroll forever on the screen to go through it. Not only was it a lot to write, it was a lot to think. So hats off to everybody for undertaking that project, and I think doing a great job. Hardest part, like we said, is detailing the habits that will facilitate their growth. And this is something we didn't necessarily expect students to just know how to do. Some cases, they still need to do some work on that. And in their careers curriculum, that's one of the things we touch on and build on, right? And we mentioned James Clear and Atomic Habits. That comes a little bit later for the senior students. Some more stuff around Stephen Covey's or Sean Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, all as part of our curriculum that will actually give the kids practice doing these things. They also need to prepare for those conferences I just mentioned, and then they need to, most importantly, act on feedback received. So that's, again, as Emily pointed out, something that a lot of students aren't maybe necessarily used to. Sometimes even students that, they receive a mark on something and they just sort of say, oh, I guess I'm a B student, or maybe I'm just a C+ student, right? We will never accept that. So we always know that, like, hey, we want to see your best as a learner. Here's where, we'd like to see you demonstrate that. Either let's revise this, or, coming up later in the project, you're going to have another chance to demonstrate that, and you can act on it then. For the teacher, we've been working to develop these plans, make sure they're complete and that they are quality. We try to evaluate the students' work in a timely manner and provide feedback for that improvement, and then meet regularly to review that progress. Emily mentioned conferencing, which we do regularly. That is like face-to-face, that is individual one-on-one, where we can specifically I was going to say confront, but that sounds very adversarial. Discuss, have a conversation about the work, and the students will and have a role in preparing for those conferences. So they come in wanting to learn something, get some piece of information, seek clarification, and then we make sure that they go away with that clarification. And for parents, most importantly, and again, if you're here tonight and you've made it through this hour, you're already demonstrating this in a huge way. It's understanding your child's plan. Our goal tonight was to sort of outline what it is in scope. Now it's over to you to go through what they have written and read, understand, and again, have that conversation with them. Engage in regular conversations. It's great asking, what did you do at school today? But I'd love that conversation to go deeper around, hey, what did you learn today? Or I noticed, your disposition was for a student that's curious. So like, how did you demonstrate that curiosity today? You now have more vocabulary to probe them with as well. And then parents have an important role during those presentations of learning as active participants. Lastly, I'm just going to quickly glance over this. Part of what we talked about in our previous meeting on how do we communicate student learning, every PLP project has this document called the growth chart. This specifically gives you sort of a one-stop dashboard for how is a student progressing inside the project we're working on at the time. This is their learning plan, but in the specific context of the project we're working on. So this is actually it's a new-ish tool for us as teachers. So we're modifying it, we're updating it project to project. And if it doesn't appear currently in Shobi for the projects your students are doing, it will. Petra, did you want to add something? You looked quizzical.
No, sorry, no.
Okay. Yeah, so that is where you can check in and say, hey, the learning plan is great, all this flowery language, but how's it actually hitting the road in the work you're doing right now? This is where you can see those demonstrations of learning, how they've been assessed at their proficiency, and then comments from both student and teacher. Whew. Okay, we vowed to try and keep this to an hour, and we've almost done that. But I'd love to just take a breath here, see if my friends and colleagues, Petra or Emily, want to add something, and then see if there are any questions. That is a lot of information.
I was just going to ask I was just going to point out that the report cards that are published tomorrow are gathering my thoughts. I'm absolutely freezing to death right now. It's
Oh,
so
you're in a
the
frozen.
school.
You're in a
I
frozen.
I honestly am frozen. I wasn't going to say that, but I'm so cold, and maybe it buys people time to ask a good question. I was going to say the report cards that are published tomorrow. Hopefully there are no surprises to anyone on the call. If you've been looking at Shobi, seeing that feedback, having the conversations with your learners, but more importantly to me on the teacher side of things is that hopefully there's no surprises to the learners who open the report card. And if there are, we would definitely encourage those conversations to happen at any time and to send us an email and book a conversation time to have that happen. As Brian highlighted before, we do have that tutorial time as the school, which happens mostly, or did you do that already, or am I dreaming that that's coming up?
I don't think I've done that yet.
Oh, okay. Spoiler, we'll be reminding everyone about the tutorial times as well. But yes, the report cards, PLB is in a bit of a unique situation because other than Maker class, which will end for the grade 8s in semester 1 and begin for the 9s and 10s in semester 2, everybody is year long. So this is truly an early report card. It's 25% of the course. So if you look at it that way, it's really, oh, sorry. I was jumping ahead again.
You were, but I thought I'll cover it.
I not because I thought questions meant the end. Yeah.
So we did have just a couple updates, and Petra just alluded there. Report cards tomorrow, which I think most people know. But the point at the bottom, we just want to emphasize, Petra made the point, humanities and cymatics are year-long courses. So the proficiency that you see reported tomorrow and at each semester is just a snapshot at this moment in time. But the learning for English and social studies is distributed across the school year all the way through June. Same with science and math. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes that's not so clear on the very not so easy to read report card that you will log in and see. Just a reminder, grades 8 and 9 will only see the provincial proficiency scale. Grades 10, 11, and 12 will receive and see a percentage. Last few reminders. Don't forget, we have Parent Central that we are trying to keep up to date. That is a portal for all things PLP, and there is information on there. The recording for this meeting and things like that will appear on there, as a few other important dates and things like that, such as the winter exhibition on December 15th. That is less than 1 month away, which honestly terrifies me. But we have grand plans for an extravaganza of unparalleled amazingness. So please, hopefully that already is circled on your calendar. Petra, I know you want to say something. I will circle back to you. Last thing is we do remind you of tutorial time. So this is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and most Wednesdays. It's very confusing because every second Wednesday there is no tutorial time, and occasionally there is no tutorial time on a different day. It's odd. You can always find the current schedule at ccove.ca, the school's website, and we will put a update on Parent Central as well. You do not need an invitation to attend, so it's wide open for all students to drop in. It can be a place just to come and work in a supervised place. It can also be a place to find teachers. So there are always at least 2 of us usually in there, and happy to have students activate that agency and come and see us and run their ideas or ask for help with us. I see a few people asking about Parent Central. Happy to share that URL again, parentcentral.ccove.ca. And Petra, did you want to just briefly highlight what will soon be appearing on Parent Central?
Yes, I spent a lot of time building it, so I would like everyone to look at it. There is a section, or will be a section in Parent Central on Destination Imagination that is starting into gear already, believe it or not. So if you've no idea what I'm talking about, your learner does. So please do talk to them. And like I said, visit the parentcentral.ca where there'll be more information about what it is, why we do it, what it means for you, what it means for the learners, and yes, that Saturday in April that you will need to book yourself to be free for. So more information to come on there. There was a question about the growth chart. So the growth chart is visited throughout the projects. I saw Emily has already answered that and used for self-assessment as well. The learning plan that we've been highlighting tonight, there is the best time to visit it is right now and often. To have a conversation with them, there's no bad time to do that. That goes for growth charts as well. But for sure, the learning plan, you can open that up right now and start talking to them and talking about the report card. Do you want to handle that one, Brad?
We try to I try to update it whenever there's anything timely to add. So I can't say that we have like a consistent publication. There's no newsletter. There's no there's no daily news. Although if one of us wanted to write that, that'd be a great thing to have. But like for example, we post like grade 8s, we haven't gone any, or 9s, we haven't gone anywhere, but grade 10s, 11s, 12s, we've been going on quite a few field trips. So anytime something like that is happening, we know you can find that information there and the forums and all that kind of stuff. We try to keep the calendar up to date. Anytime something's happening, we will add it there with links to how to join this meeting for things like that. And we update it whenever there's an occasion to. It also will have like this resource library area of sort of evergreen content around things like destination imagination and parents' role in PBL and things like that. So I would suggest, why not visit it once a week? That would be a great idea.
I do think when there's something important and new in it, we do tend to mention it at meetings like these. So for example, like Destination Imagination, I'll point that out, and anything about the learning plans, Brian would point out as well.
I would say if any parent ever thinks they need some information and they should be able to find it there and they don't, please shoot me an email, because that's exactly the feedback I'm looking for. Because if one parent wants to find something, I guarantee there are more. So we would like to make that a useful resource that actually has utility. So would really welcome that feedback. All right, we are not going to disappear right away, but I'm going to thank everybody for making it through this and giving up your time. And I'm going to stop the recording in case people might be more comfortable speaking without the recording. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, everyone.